And they said, well, that's the bread that we want. Jesus said, if you eat this bread, you'll never be hungry. You drink this cup, you'll never be thirsty again. He says, but I'm going to make you a challenge. He said, because if you're going to eat this bread and drink this cup, you need to be aware that you're eating my flesh and you're drinking my blood. And if any man eats my flesh and drinks my blood, he has my life in him. And if any man doesn't eat my flesh and doesn't drink my blood, he doesn't have my life in him. John chapter 6, verse 60. Therefore, many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a hard saying. Who can understand it? And when Jesus knew in himself that his disciples complained about this, he said to them, does this offend you? What then if you should see the Son of Man ascend where he was before? It's the Spirit that gives life. The flesh profits you nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit, and there are life, but there are some of you who do not believe, for Jesus knew from the beginning who they were, who did not believe and who would betray him. I want to stop here for a moment because I want to make sure we understand why everyone was offended, because I don't think anybody in this room got offended when I said, unless you eat Jesus' flesh and drink his blood, you don't have any part in him. I didn't see one person cringe inside. I don't think I can commit to that. Why? Well, I think part of it is because we realize we're not actually being asked to drink blood, and we're not actually being asked to eat flesh. That's the first reason we don't cringe. And the Jewish mind, you didn't ever drink blood. So even the idea that drinking the cup from Jesus would be drinking blood would have been anathema to Moses. And so that's step one, that's cringeworthy. But the second reason most of us don't cringe is because we don't cut covenants with people that are life and death covenants. We sign contracts. If we fail to keep our end of the deal, we might get sued and lose our property, but nobody kills us. But under covenant obligation, you sacrificed an animal, poured its blood on the ground, walked in between the pieces of that animal, shook hands with the other party, and basically said, if I break my end of the deal, you get to do this to me. So blood covenants carried an enormous amount of weight. So much weight that it cost you your life to break it. And so when Jesus says to the Jews standing there that day in John chapter 6, you're going to have to eat my flesh and drink my blood, and if you do, I'll give you what's mine. Jesus was saying to them, you and I are going to enter into a covenant, and you're going to have to eat what I offer. And if you do, you get what's mine and I get what's yours. And everyone that day took a step back because, think like a Jew, they're already in covenant with Moses. So if we're in covenant with Moses and you're offering to give us your bread and your blood, that means we're going to have to enter into covenant with you. And that's the equivalent of getting married the second time. Yeah. And we are not allowed to break the covenant marriage that we have with God. So how are we going to cheat on Moses to marry Jesus? And so many of his disciples take a step back. Now at this point, we're not just dealing with 12 disciples, we're dealing with a lot of disciples. We're about to pare it down to 12. But a lot of the disciples take a step back from Jesus and say, this is a hard saying. We are offended. We can't do this. Jesus says, hey, it's not the flesh. I'm not asking you to eat my actual flesh or drink my actual blood. I'm asking you in the Spirit, will you enter into this covenant with me? Well, the answer is no, they wouldn't do it because they had Moses. And I fast forward, if you would, to the upper room. Remember where Jesus takes bread, tears it, hands it to his disciples and says, take, eat, this is my body. Now, if I'm in that room, I'm eating every scrap I can get my hands on because I'm thinking whatever Jesus had, I get. You kidding me? Anybody else?
That's right.
I mean, I'm elbowing people to get their piece of bread. Just being honest with you. I mean, how much can I have? If that's your body, I want what you are. I don't know how fast they were, but do you realize that when you reached across that table, if your name's Peter, James, John, Thomas, whatever, you're in that. When you reach across that table and take that bread and eat it, you are entering into his body. And when he hands them that cup, he says, this is a cup of a New Testament. This is a cup of a new covenant. New covenant. What happens to your old one when you drink this? You just cheated on it. No, it's not gone yet. He hadn't died at the cross. That temple's still standing. He said, you're going to cheat on it. But don't worry, because I'm going to take that thing away. I'm giving you new wine. And for a little while, you're going to carry it in old wineskins. That's the whole argument of the New Testament, book of Hebrews. Grace believers carrying new wine in old wineskins. And it was bursting and cracking. Because they were going back to the old Moses. They were going back to the old way. Because as long as that temple was still standing, It hit those nostrils and they thought, I need to be killing me some lambs. So when Jesus hands you that bread and hands you that cup and you take it into you, you're cheating on Moses. I don't think we realize what a big deal it was at the upper room when the disciples actually ate the communion with Jesus. A lot of them had such guilt and condemnation. Holy Spirit showed me this a few years ago, and it was so humbling for me because I've dealt with my own share of guilt and condemnation. Anybody else ever dealt with it? I think if we're being honest, a lot of us are dealing with it often. The disciples ate the bread. I think the reason why the disciples scattered, Jesus said this, they're going to smite the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. I think the reason why the disciples scattered, they walked out of that upper room full of condemnation. Because they just ate a covenant meal with Jesus, and in their mind, their grandfather just rolled over in his grave on what they just did to Moses. How many of you know some of the most powerful voices of condemnation is your dead grandparents and that old pastor you grew up under? Because you're thinking, if he knew what I was sitting here amening today, if he knew what I was talking about grace, if he knew what I was saying about finished work, man, he wouldn't even think I was saved anymore. I went through that whole experience as I came into understanding the finished work, haunted by those old ghosts. I think they walked out of that upper room and went, oh my gosh, what have we done? What have we done to Moses? We just ate the bread. This guy better be the real deal. Right? Yeah. Hey guys, I don't know if we realize what happens at Calvary when they hang Jesus on a tree. They didn't stone him by Jewish law. They hung him on a cross by Roman law. They did that on purpose. Because by hanging him on a cross by Roman law, Deuteronomy said, curses every man that hangs on a tree. That way everyone who thought Jesus was the one would watch him die on a cross and go, you can't be chosen of God if you die on a piece of wood. This guy's cursed. We followed the wrong person. We bet on the wrong horse. So every disciple watched Jesus have the nails plunged into his hand and his feet, and they went, oh my God, what have I done? Oh my God, what have I done? I entered into covenant with this guy. Surely he's going to come off that cross. Surely he's not going to stay there. He can't lose. We can't lose. He can't die. If he dies, how will I face my parents? How will I go back to synagogue? What do I do next Saturday at synagogue on the Sabbath whenever what do I do? It's Passover week. Do I eat the lamb? I just ate what I thought was the lamb. And then he hangs his head and dies and says, it is finished, and the sky grows black. And when the sky grows black, they go, oh my God, even God's mad. I'm telling you what happened. This was the mentality. They go, God's angry. Oh no, what have I done? And they scatter. What an amazing moment. What a powerful thing. So they come back. You know the story. You know they come back, and they come back quickly. And I don't think the condemnation overwhelmed them. Of course, they certainly drift back to the resurrection. It's a little bit hard for them to buy. And when they do buy it, though, their hearts are overfilled with joy because they realize they did not follow the loser. They followed the winner. That the stone has been rolled away, that the tomb is empty, that they now are victorious, that they've entered into covenant with an ever-living man, and that the flesh they ate and the blood that they drink is not dead but alive. And that looks a whole lot better than dead Moses.